guys, welcome back to the Danger Planet. This is Brandon.
And I'm Sam. And today we are joined by a couple of our good friends. We have Haku and Popedarpa from Badfo Haku. And the four of us are going to be discussing the Masters of the Guild. We're going to be letting you know where we think they are in the power rankings, their strengths, their weaknesses. And at the end, we're going to talk about our favorite versatile models and maybe out of keyword hires in the guild. So if you're playing Guild and you're looking to get an idea of what's competitive and where you should focus, we hope this video is useful for you.
All right, so yeah, honestly, here's the tier list. We got Guild coming up. I really do think that we are going to be starting with Perdita. I am not a fan of Perdita 1. Perdita 2, I'm a bit more of a fan of, but we'll get to that later. I would actually put Perdita 1 into C tier. I think that guns are mostly okay right now, but only guns that ignore things. And her guns really kind of don't. The fact that a lot of them get focus is nice, and her having expert shot for friendly fire is nice. But the real big ones you kind of want to ignore are cover concealment, because stat 7, while it's nice, if they're also stat 7 defense, it's now lost its luster. And so I'm actually going to put Perdita 1 in C. I don't think I see this model a lot, and I think that's for very good reason.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that Perdita, like, insofar as she has a strength, it's largely a strength based on you and your opponent not setting up the terrain properly. If there's a lot of clear firing lanes, she's fine with it. My big problem with her is that her crew is so resource hungry just to, like, do the basic thing that they do. Like, just triggering Aporel, which is an ability that is fine, requires you to spend tons of cards. And if you're not triggering it, then you're spending tons of AP focusing. And that's just not where you want to be. I think that I would definitely use her if the table is really, really open. But even then, I have to think about the pool, and I have to think about what my opponent's playing, and I'd rather just play someone else.
She was my favorite guild master, I think, when I was first starting out dabbling with guild. I don't actually think she makes A tier, and if she makes B tier, she's bottom of B tier. But if she's in C tier, she's definitely top of C tier. The reason being that she's one of the better scheming keywords in guild, and guild doesn't have good scheming keywords to begin with.
They didn't before.
If you were to, her actions are actually pretty good. Say she doesn't ignore cover, but in a sense, she kind of does. She gets innate positive flip to damage shooting anything with a max health. And with one-shotting, like, medium range models being as good as it is and continues to be as good as it is, I think she has a useful place in certain matchups where you know that you're going to be seeing certain models where that threshold of, like, if I can just kill that 6 health model on turn 1 from across the board, I'm going to be good, and I'm playing Dita. I know I can do it through cover because I'm going to have that double plus, or I can do it through hard to wound. She's got some narrow matchups, so I can agree with leaving her in C, but I think it all depends on what else we put in there. She's got strengths. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I agree with the C tier. I think that Up RL is a neat ability, but it's just, like, you can't use it the way it feels like it was designed to me. And although, like, having a million 2/4/5s that can randomly spike crazy damage seems really good, especially when you can just, like, ignore armor and shielded, like, it just feels like she's trying to do too many things, and none of them are focused enough to make her a really good, like, specified master. And I'm not a fan.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty solid. We'll move on to her title. I think the title answers what Sam brought up the best, is she is very card intensive, and the title is just like, we fixed that. Now you can actually play her and, not be blown out by the fact that you have no cards. I think this actually really moves her along with the summoning and having access to a bit more counter tech. It actually, in my mind, pretty solidly puts her in A. Somewhere in A, maybe the lower part of A, but definitely an A in my mind.
And yeah, I thought you were going to put her in B, and I was going to disagree and put her in A, but she is great. My background before playing Malifaux is I spent some years judging Magic the Gathering, and if you play Magic, you know how a bad card becomes a good card if you staple draw a card to it. And Perdita just staples draw a card to a bunch of stuff that her crew wants to be doing anyway, which is fantastic. And it's kind of ironic that because Perdita like actually enables you to make use of family values in Aporel, suddenly you have this incentive to cluster up more, and so suddenly now you're vulnerable to things that punish bubble crews because there's a lot more of those now than there used to be, and that would be a downside for her. Except she also has this absolutely absurd ability to just zero out a lot of those things like shockwaves. Between shielded, between the ability she has to summon a pistolero that has that aura, reducing shockwave and pulse and blast damage. She's just really, really good at countering the things that should be good against her. And then Trick Shot is just an insane action. I mean, I play Ophelia 2, and Perdita 2's Trick Shot is just better. And Trick Shot is a great ability. So yeah, I'd say she's an A. Like, I feel like she has such an incredible toolbox of answers, and she also has a very proactive game plan, and that's a really nasty combo.
Top of B, bottom of A for me. I think there's a lot of things that get overlooked, and a lot of like theory land, Magic and Christmas land type stuff that people like to think of when they look at the card. Like, realistically, the crew does enjoy spreading out a bit, and so head of the Ortegas can sometimes just not fire if you're playing a bit more of the board than you might otherwise in a normal game. And then a lot of the things that you might want to do to take real good advantage of Aporel don't trigger Head of the Ortegas. For example, if you're just getting an extra shot in, that won't trigger your Head of the Ortegas to get the card back. In which case, she's not significantly different in resource economy than D1 is when you're actually doing those actions. That being said, when you're triggering Head of Ortegas, free focus. It's always good. Then the other thing is that her skewer is still really squishy, even if you're summoning pistoleros. So, like, if she is A, I think she's bottom of A. I think she still has a lot of problems in the very aggressive meta that has emerged in Burns, but overall, I think that she's still a solid pick that you'll play in a lot of pools.
I think I agree with A for sure. I think that the Perdita cannon that I just picture her crew being just lacked the fuel before, and just her ability to really just put the pipeline of card draw in turns Aporel on and makes that an actual like viable play style, and it combos so effectively having all of the extra card draw with having just like a bunch of randomly spiking 4 and 5 damage dudes. I think that she's a home run. I've only played her against her one time, but it was not a great experience. Jesus. Yeah, I really like Perdita too. I think she's a nice example of what they can do when they sort of tune a model or a master's keyword more towards like its original design philosophy.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I think it definitely is a little bit more just they really just tuned it to be better, which is why I actually think Perdita 1 is just so loud, because why would you ever play her now with Perdita 2?
I would really like to see Perdita 1 get the Rasputina treatment and have them change her, considering it just seems like Perdita Neverborn Hunter is just like Perdita 2 more Perdita.
Yeah.
So harder.
Yeah. All right. Well,
now with extra Perdita flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to Sonnia. Sonnia 1, she's in a weird spot for me because I do think she was underrated previously before titles came out, and that now that titles did come out, she's in like a weirder spot. There's no denying that the whole lowered range stick of Sonnia really messes with certain like masters and keywords. And because I'm making these qualifications, I really do think I'm going to put her in B, even though I think in like the matches she's good, she could probably put on a strong A. Appearance, it's one of those reasons like why you have to find a reason to play her, and she has specific strengths, but it's not like you really have to find them.
So this is the first area I think I'm going to disagree with you. I would put Sonnia, it's maybe probably the top of C. Sonnia 1, and the big issue there is I just think the game has kind of left her behind a little bit. She is Def 4. She needs line of sight to do anything. On like which she didn't used to. That's maybe just me remembering old editions and having some rose-colored glasses for them. But she has fairly situational bonus action. Stoke the Flames is fine. Like focused on Witchlings is fine. But it's not like the kind of thing where you effectively have 4 AP. she really suffers against condition removal because there are a lot of masters that tag on and use burning in the game. And Sonnia is one of the ones that really uses it in almost just the most traditional way possible, like as a source of damage on opposing models, which means condition removal hurts her more than it hurts the other Sonnia, which we'll get to. But largely where I'm coming from is she's def 4. She's not particularly beefy. Her defensive tech is kind of marginal. And yes, she reduces range, but that's very binary. Either you reduce someone's range to the point where they can't hit you, or you reduce it less than that and they can just hit you anyway and they don't really suffer. Like, it doesn't matter if, you're 8 inches away from someone. If your 12-inch attack is reduced to 8 inches, you're still shooting them. And really when it comes down to is I look at things like Seeking Flames. Her attack ignores cover and concealment. Well, the only reason cover is an issue is that she has a projectile on her signature flame burst. So maybe if she didn't have that projectile, and you'd have these other options, people wouldn't get covered, but also she wouldn't suffer friendly fire. She wouldn't be locked out of using it when she was in melee, because she has, despite having a huge sword, it's still a stat 5. I just think that there's too many things that make Sonnia sad right now, and it's not necessarily that she's bad. It just feels like the game has left her in the dust.
I guess I'll just jump in and say I disagree on almost every one of those points, but without addressing them all, I'll just say I agree with her being in B tier. I think her durability is fine. The Hazardous Aura goes a long way in the combination of reducing range so that ranged attacks don't hit you, and then also having the Hazardous Aura so if they're engaging you in melee, they're taking a ton of damage for the privilege of doing so. You'll usually be playing the title version of Sonnia, but I think, as Longtin pointed out, when you get the matchups where Smothering Flame is just really going to nerf someone, and I should point out, it's not when they have a bunch of guns or when they have a bunch of ranged attacks, but when they have a bunch of tacticals or a bunch of tacticals that just have a range on them. Even like range 3, range 6 tacticals, you shove a few inches off them, and suddenly instead of playing your perfect bubble, you're walking into base contact with your guys to try and get your heal off, or you're handing out an upgrade or something. And that can be a really, really big problem for a lot of crews. For example, if McCabe, he has the 6-inch toss on his upgrade, right? If that goes down to 2 inches, you're never tossing upgrades, and then you're not getting fast, and you're missing out a lot of value, etc. There's enough crews like that where you might find a reason to play Sonnia 1 if you declared Sonnia for the purpose of playing Sonnia 2 to begin with. We'll get into that with Sonnia 2.
So I think I sort of agree on the B. I think that Sonnia is I think the first master that we've talked about, but it's going to be a continuing theme of, I think Sonnia 1 at least has some really very niche situations that she's very good in, like reducing a bunch of tactical ranges with her Smothering Flame ability. And I think that because in a game where Malifaux Burns masters aren't an optional thing that you can do after you see what crew you're playing against, I think that she loses a lot of utility. And I think that if that weren't a thing that you were doing in a tournament, where if you declared Sonnia Criid before declaration, you had to choose one, I just feel like the corner case scenario where she might be really effective is just so much more of a crapshoot, and you can't really control it. Whereas having the ability to flip into Sonnia 2 if you know what's going to happen, or once you figure out what the enemy master declaration is, it gives you the ability to know, if you know the game well enough, whether the exact case that she'll excel really well in outside of the scheme pool stuff, but versus the opponent's crew, and then you can sort of put her in and then blow their gap that they don't have covered wide open. Or if they're playing a master that doesn't have a lot of burning removal, whatever it might be. I think that she would probably be mid C tier at best if she didn't have those really, really aggressive spikes where she can just turn so many things off. Not to mention, there's just crews that can't deal with burning, right? But I think that if I had to declare Sonnia Criid as just Sonnia Criid 1, and I couldn't flop into 2 if I needed to, I would say D, maybe. But she has some good spiky points, but it's not great to be stuck playing her if they have an answer, because if they have an answer, I just don't see you winning.
We're gonna go straight into Sonnia 2. I think I might have a little contention on this, but in my mind, it's an easy yes. I love this master. I adore it. I think any model where the stuff that's good against it, and you just add the text on, it can't be ignored. makes the stuff, bad against it now. So incorporeal models suck, and the only real thing you can do is have flying models, because that severe pyromarker train's amazing. Her bonus action is just a guaranteed ping 1 damage pretty consistently. It only needs a 6 to go off, and it's range 12. So you can get a lot of range on a 12 50 mil, and then 2 inches from the 50 mil. Get those pyromarkers. Confiscated lore is an amazing ability. You can reposition so that if someone does melee engage you, you can just push yourself away, and then rig the top of their deck to be terrible. Engaged by magic. If you guys don't know, guild lawyers are one of the best models ever created. If you obey a Witchling Thrall to charge, you now get to take 2 attacks off that charge action, M2E style. It's all around. I think she's just amazing. Plus flips. You can slap Ignore Friendly Fire on her if you really want to, because guild have good upgrades. Plus, you'll have built-in armor piercing then too on that upgrade, which can be insane in certain matchups. For example, Yonlo, you just killed the dogs. So I'm a huge fan of her. Easy S in my mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. This is sort of for me, like, I don't know what I'm going to consider to be S, like what's the line for S, but it's either bottom of S or top of A. Like, she's insane. She's awesome. I think that if she was the only Malifaux Burns master that existed, she would be bonkers S. Malifaux Burns did introduce a lot of marker removal, but she has so much like stuff besides those markers. Like the marker thing is what really kind of pops off her card to me, but it like you said, Enraged by the Mage is one of those abilities that looks kind of innocuous until you remember that a charge is a push. Channeled Flame is one of those abilities that looks worse than it is, because then the easiest use case for it is to just stand in a pyre marker and have plus twists on everything you do forever. She has a bonus action that's always good. I'm comfortable with S. She's great. Oh my god.
Yeah, so bottom of S, top of A is where I would have put her to begin with. The reason why I'm not entirely sold on the S ranking is because even while she fits the checkbox of what I usually call S, which is something that's really hard for your opponent to interact with, since she's like always got actions that are good, she can do whatever she wants with confiscated lore, really, and you can't ignore her shtick. I don't feel like her highs are as high as some other like S tiers I would consider in the game. And I feel like she still has a hard time converting attrition to points. She does come with the best game runner in guild. Contrary to popular belief, it's not Lady J, it's the Hovering Flame. Get your facts right. But I think that she has... did I say Hovering Flame? That's the bonus action.
That's
anyways.
Its ability is Hovering Flame, and that's why it's so good.
Yeah. Her keyword doesn't struggle that much, but it's still not the greatest keyword in guild. And as I mentioned, she does struggle to convert points outside of the totem. So I don't think she makes quite to S for me personally, but I can respect the placement.
I'm sort of torn as well. I think maybe S, but I don't know. I haven't seen this enough, I think, to really feel S. I mean, she definitely has a lot of things going for her, but if she also had like one of the Karis things where like the burning were the thing that she didn't really worry about, maybe I would say hard S for sure. That you can't remove it, but I don't know. You can just walk around fire markers, right?
She doesn't need to set her opponent's crew on fire. Like just covering the board with unremovable
around them.
Yeah. Unremovable severe terrain that
I
also
suppose
incorporeal models can ignore. My like beef with her insofar as I have one is that the stuff that she does is all powerful in kind of an incremental way, which I think is kind of what Landon was getting at. That it's not like a knockout punch. It just generally makes everything better for you and worse for your opponent. But something that really pushed her over the top for me is, and this is maybe just a personal heuristic of how I evaluate masters, is it's super hard to have a bad activation with Sonnia. Like even a bad Sonnia activation is pretty freaking good. And she has a lot of tools to make herself not have a bad activation, like just confiscated lore, and now all your attacks are going to hit. On the pyre, just do a bunch of unresistible damage. There's a floor to how bad her activations can be, and that to me is a big plus in her favor.
Yeah, I guess I'll just close it out also on the fact that she just gets soul stones whenever something with burning 2 dies. Like she has so much resources, and I think guild versatile is really good. And especially if you're playing in something double masters, I think if you want like that big all out front damage, you can also like hiring Hoffman her is pretty good. I've been toying with this concept of hiring Lucius 2 in her to just have like to fix that like scheme problem, and also just have a ton of damage potentially. And I think there's some interesting things where I feel like you can support her because she's always doing amazing things consistently by herself. That really, as long as the rest of Guild has good models, she's going to be a really good master.
All right. So who's next?
Onwards to Lady J. Lady J1 is decently nerfed in my mind as not as being pushed out from the top where she kind of was sitting. And yeah, I think Lady J1 still has her obvious strengths of being, range 2, stat 6, 3, 4, 5 greatsword with good triggers. And that's never going to go away. And she has Leap and Juggernaut and all these other good things. And while it's a little bit lower on the power creep end at the moment, it's never really going to be bad against specific matchups and in specific keywords. It is kind of sad that Dashel 2 kind of just does what she wants to do better than her now. But if you like Lady J, or if you pick the other title we're going to talk about and then have to change your mind to play like that upfront brawl method, it's a pretty good fallback to have. And for that, I'll give her a B. I can be moved on this though.
Yeah, I in terms of like the relative position of the masters we've got, I agree. Although remember, I did put my own personal ranking had Sonnia 1 and C. I think Lady Justice is defensible at B, but it's at the low end of B. And there's really like two big reasons for that. The first is that given that she's a master whose thing is that she goes in there and just kind of rips things up herself, the fact that we're living in just a much more dangerous world than we were pre-Malifaux Burns, just there's a lot, like, it's a lot more deadly out there. So the fact that she's in harm's way is now, I think, more significant, because before she was resilient enough to kind of be able to be safely thrown out there, and that's not so much the case anymore. The other thing that is kind of tipping me over on her is that her keyword is not awesome. There's a couple of good models, but especially in like the current gaining grounds, I don't love trying to scheme with marshals. And yeah, you've got out of keyword hires. That's what we're going to talk about, but it's not, that's not, you don't want to be necessarily be priced into that. You want to have good keyword options, and marshal keyword, I just feel like there's a lot of scheme pools where I would rather have a different hiring pool.
Despite the fact that Marshall has like 2 to 3 of my favorite models in Guild, I don't necessarily disagree. Jury and Load Marshall are top tier Guild models in my opinion, but that's a little controversial. I do agree with B overall. I think that she used to be like probably one of the better Guild Masters, and I still think she's got some good play. Like as far as raw damage goes, she still plays pretty well, but there's a lot of raw damage in the game at the moment, and she's not the best at it comparatively. The things that stick out to me now more are things like Restore the Natural Order, being able to pulse out a bunch of injured. So in like Swarmier type games, that can be really good. Or the fact that you still have quick reflexes, which lets you put out a lot of attacks into different models very quickly. So rather than trying to fight tall opponents, I think she's reasonably good at fighting wide opponents. And I think part of that is why I think she works reasonably well in conjunction with her title, because the first version of the title works really well, or not the first version. The first version works very well against wide opponents, whereas I think the second version works very good against tall opponents. Players who are taking these elite lists are just going to get absolutely destroyed by the coffins. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think I would put Lady Justice 1 in somewhere between top of C, bottom of B. I think that her scope is just very narrow. It's damage, and she does damage well, but it's just damage. I think if we're evaluating her on a scale of how good she is to, because you can declare Lady Justice and then flip to 1 or 2, I think that maybe there's a lot more room to say B, because in the situation where she excels, where your opponent has a lot of weak stuff, or a lot of incorporeal, or even just like a lot of like a swarm list, and she could just go murder the whole list in like one turn. I think that maybe she would excel a lot more, but if you have Justice 1 against a list that doesn't really care about that or spreads out too much, I just don't see her doing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point, and I'm going to get right into J2 is I think it does complement Lady J2 because as we talk about, that being said, I don't think Lady J2 needs complimenting because in my opinion, easy windmill slam S. The coffins are just disgusting. Height 2, 50 mil blocking. It's just that her crew can just walk through and generate by just taking a point of damage pretty much whenever they want. It just makes it disgusting. The fact that she ignores line of sight on her gun and on her placing shockwave, just oh my god, I'm not understanding how this model really got printed, to be honest. Everything she does is bonkers insane. I don't know why they slapped regen on her. I don't know why her place a coffin marker and pulse out focus to her crew doesn't even have a TN. A lot of her card doesn't really necessarily make sense to me. Why does Ashwood Coffin get injured? Like it's just like, oh god, this was already good, and then they just kept making her better by just adding these other small benefits to really make her just over the top. You can spam every Pine Box model in the game into her crew, and now they're all amazing, even though like they weren't great before, but now they're just bonkers good. So that's my take on her. Just disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that we might have a little bit of disagreement when we get to the end, but I think she's the best guild master, and I don't even think it's all that close. Those boxes are absolutely idiotic. Like, let's take a 0-inch action that the whole crew has and make it like a 4-inch range that also permanently leaves a piece of terrain that I can completely ignore and that like screws with my opponent in 3 different significant ways. And that's one thing on her card, and all of the knobs on her card are absolutely turned to the absolute maximum. Like every time I look at this card, it grows new text. Like I swear to God, when I looked at the card this morning, she didn't automatically ping 1 damage to anyone who escapes a pine box anywhere near her, but now she does. And especially when I'm looking at some of the other masters that we'll get to probably in some of the later videos where I feel like they do some cool things, but maybe the knobs are turned all to like the most safe positions. Like that's what I think is often the downside of some of the weaker masters in this game, that the everything is kind of dialed down to be a little bit too safe. There's absolutely nothing safe on her card whatsoever. Every single thing. Like, why does her ranged attack have a built-in positive twist? I don't know.
Why does her shockwave allow you to take her bonus?
Yeah, which is why anything. Like everything about this model is insane. She's not just great personally; she makes the bad models in her keyword good. And like Perdita sort of does that, but Lady Justice does that to an extreme degree. So yeah, absolutely. I think she's the best in the faction.
Wouldn't be a go around if I didn't give us a hot take to start off. So Death Marshals were good before, and people just didn't understand what Pine Box was supposed to do. Now Pine Box does what they thought it was supposed to do, and that's not okay. So yeah, I totally agree that she's supposed to be an S. And you gotta understand, like 1 in every 10 games, if you were to Pine Box 1 model, your opponent's gonna Black Joker it and just not get his model back. Now you're not Pine Boxing, once a turn. You're Pine Boxing like 5 times a turn. So like you're gonna have a Black Joker come up on some important Pine Box, and if it's your master, like good luck. You Pine Box a master on the last turn. Congrats, you didn't need to do 12 wounds. It's just fucking dead. There's your assassinate. Pine Box really good, and unlike a lot of the other guild keywords, I think she's pretty good at converting attrition to points. You get free fast a lot of the time on your Death Marshals from their ability to be fast if there's undead nearby. Your coffins just make you undead for some reason. Jerry is just also good at extending your reach for scoring with obeys. And you get a lot of free passive damage. And like I want to say, I don't know if it's been said, but one of the things that I really think makes something go from like A tier to S tier is how well your opponent can interact with it. And there's more room for interaction with this than there is with like a Sonnia probably. But like you ignore line of sight, you take their models off the board so they don't even get to like body block you. And the fact that you don't have to interact with your terrain, but they do, it's real gross.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the only thing you can really do with Lady Justice is try to kill her personally, and good luck. She's a 6/6 with hard to wound and regen 2, and probably a leadline cloak.
I disagree. I think if you pick apart enough of her crew, like Death Marshals aren't the hardest to kill. They take effort, but it's very doable. If you pick apart enough of the models, she's not going to be scoring points by herself the same way like Lady Justice 1 would.
That's fair, but
and that's
she also,
perhaps the weakness of her, but she still moves 6.
She also can pine box 2 enemies per activation just herself.
Oh yeah,
no reason.
While giving them injured, so
yeah, while giving them injured, just complete idiocy. Also, this is very, very rarely ever going to come up, but I do find it amusing that if she pine boxes somebody and dies before they come out, they're dead forever.
No. If they can't unbury next to
works.
her, they just unbury in their deployment zone.
Yes,
correct.
Oh, that's right.
That is how that works.
That's right. I keep forgetting how that works because I almost got someone with a sandworm on that too. So that's right.
Wow. Yeah. Don't do that.
Never mind.
Don't do that.
It's fine. We'll edit that out.
No. I want to look stupid in front of everybody. It's very
Please do.
So I think that just as somebody who started this game playing Titania, I can't say how much it makes people squirm when there are just like a bunch of markers that they can't deal with, right? And the fact that they're destructible, sure, but if you're making like 1 or 2 per activation, I just can't. There's going to be a critical mass, and you ignore them. It's just a lot. Not to mention the rest of her card is bonkers, but I really, really like the coffin markers. I think they're great. So yeah, I completely agree. S tier for all the reasons everybody else said.
Also, she has access to 33, who is like really idiotic right now.
Yeah,
literally.
I do not.
Probably the best non-master in the game.
I do not think that the bury the opponent's master on turn 1 and kill them thing that people keep talking about is that good. But
that we'll deal with that when we get.
We'll talk about that.
But like even without that, 33 is insane.
Yeah. Model seems cool, and it's a neat lore piece too. So like the cooler the lore, the more okay I am with a model being broken.
All right, we'll move on to Dashel. I think Dashel is a weird one. I have not been a fan of him, honestly, since the summon nerfs. I think he basically relegated himself out of the game. Also, just the change to GG2, which pretty much was a summon nerfs as well. But I'm not a fan of him anymore. I was never honestly that big of a fan of him because it was just really annoying to get 2 magic cards summoned on you for no reason. But now that just doesn't feel great. Nothing really feels great. The master is just not that good anymore. I would put it around where Perdita is on like a level of I'm never seeing this model. I don't think, but you can talk me out of that. Maybe.
Yeah, I would actually disagree with that. Like, I mean, I'm trying to consider him in isolation too, because this is another master where I'm just going to declare the title 100% of the time. But I would put him in B. Maybe not the top of B, but I'd put him in B. And I think the reason for that is, first of all, that his summons are like he doesn't have really holes in his summons. Like he can, if he needs to summon a mounted guard he needs to summon an executioner, those are 2 very different circumstances. But in those circumstances, those are both excellent summons. It's a lot of models that summon don't have that level of like their summons don't have that level of versatility. Like they don't all the summons that they can make do similar things, and Dashel doesn't. I also think his totem is incredible, and I think that the summon nerfs hurt him a lot. Like I'm not going to deny that, and so I think for example on like symbols, I would feel a lot less good about him because I don't really want to hire mounted guards, and on symbols you'd kind of have to. But I think that given that he can still scheme with them, just not the turn they show up, and they are pretty good schemers, and also given that I think he works well with the versatiles, the guild mage and the Gatling gunner that they got, those are both like very strong with him. So I don't know. I like him. I think he's fine, and I think he's fine. He's a master when you show up, you can sort of adapt on the fly, which is something all summoners can do to a greater or lesser extent. But I've generally been impressed in the games I've played against him. I don't think he's as good as his title, but I think he is fine. So I'd put him mid B or low B.
Still an A from me. He's got really good attacks. He's got access to free focus. He happens to also summon very versatile arrays of models. Like hiring or summoning a fucking warden is still really good, right? And mounted guard are hireable or summonable in my opinion. Like they're very good at scheming, and he himself is also just a very strong deterrent piece into a lot of pools where it's like, oh, I have to play markers, but if I play markers, they just get picked up and turned into summons. a lot of people forget, I guess, at this point in time, that you don't have to draw free cards while summoning with your master. You can also just deny points. I do still think the title is better, but I don't think it's by so wide of a margin that you'll never play the original. Like, his summoning's still good. And in things like ley lines, you can even still do the strategies with your summons. So, like, I think he's definitely still got space and will still be played and is still very good.
I agree with the beats here. I think the thing that swings it for me is just the versatility of the his summonable models, coming from a faction that has a couple different things that I can summon and a couple different summoner sort of archetypes, but they're all very similar in what they can do. I just executioners are really good in their circumstances. The mounted guard are also very good in very different circumstances, and I think that there's a lot to be said for the flexibility that offers. Plus, Loot the Corpse is insane.
Yeah. So what really I think solidified this and crystallized this in my mind is I recently played a game against Dashel where I was running Marcus 2. And so I had to think, like, he can summon, executioners on me. Like, that's something I always have to be aware of. I need to plan and play around the possibility that he could summon executioners, like, basically into melee with my master. And I need to be, not into melee with Marcus 2, obviously, who need to be 4 inches away because of the aura. But the point is he can summon them close enough to really cause me problems, and I need to be able to deal with that. And that changed the way I played. And over the course of the game, he just didn't. He just summoned mounted guards because they were better in the circumstances. And so
he makes you really have to play around things, and then can capitalize on the fact that if you don't play around it, he can blow you open. But if you do play around it, then he can just pivot and do something else until you open a hole that he can punish you on. I think that there's just a lot to be said if you really understand the matchup and really what you're doing. That versatility and flexibility is unparalleled. I think I'm pretty confident mid-B.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you talk into mid-B, mainly because I actually, when I've been making these tier lists, I've been trying to lean away to C, just because I do think actually most masters end up being in a B spot. But I guess I can see it. I'll just say this though, in my defense, I honestly think anytime I see Dashel 1 declared anymore now, I literally feel like I have the game won. That's normally because I'm only playing S tier masters, so. That's fair.
I think also it is important to note here that Dashel probably 1 and 2 should probably both be in D tier for the crime that he committed against Colodi.
All right, I was going to disagree until you mentioned Colodi. You have my full support. Bring back Colodi. Save the chair.
Save Colodi. You heard it here first, folks.
R.I.P. Puppet. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the sort of way we've captioned the letters. Like, specific, he does have strengths, but I don't think they're narrow.
Yeah, I think they're very diverse. Yeah,
that's fair. And I can get behind that.
Loot their corpse, unlimited soul stones. Just
all right. Let's look at Bashel.
Okay.
Yeah, Bashel I think is an easy yes in my mind. The only question is it before or after Sonnia? And honestly, I'd put them at pretty similar ranks. This model is just disgusting. Second Slice is just an amazing ability to just be able to consistently pulse out 1, potentially 2 damage, while also, maybe pulsing out willpower duels or giving out focus. His ability to summon and take a non-general charge action is just really silly, especially because mark removal is just good right now. So having access to marker removal in general is good. The fact that you're summoning off of it is just stupid, especially because it's a take a hit model. Then Draw Him In is probably the one that's going to see the least amount of play, but it's still a decent ability. And has good triggers that make it make it so that you actually will potentially take this. His just melee attack is amazing. It's a 3/4/5 stat 6 range 2 with the ability to take it again. Oh yeah, you lose 1 damage. Oh well, you're stat 6 on a 3/4/5. If you can hit him twice, it's great. The shield that he gives out, the frenzied charge, Pursue still being on him, so it really is actually like a stat 7, and then rush as well, so you can charge 7 multiple times, so 14-inch charges, and then 16 inches up the board if you go in a straight line on just engagement range on a charge. It's just insane. And then he allows his whole stone to use his whole crew to use soul stones, which is just a whole nother level of insane to just staple onto the card. And that's what really pushes it up to like good S tier. Is his whole crew is now very sustainable. It's one of their big problems is Even though Mounted Guard are great, they were a little frail, and a lot of his crew honestly was a little frail. And now they're not. And because he has, loot on a few of his models, even the one he summons, correct me if I'm wrong, you get a lot of soul stones back.
Yeah, they have it.
Yeah.
I would say he's above Sonnia, below Justice, obviously, but I would put him above Sonnia for pretty much the reasons you mentioned. I think the fact that the big thing with him that I'm noticing is, first of all, the combination of Rush and Frenzied Charge is insane.
Yeah.
Like, that's just straight up, like, you don't even need to be a good player to look at that and be like, wow, there's something wrong there. That is nuts. He has an AoE effect he has an AoE version of an effect that Arcanists pay 2 soulstones per model for. Like, just think about that. People take soulstone cash. It's a good upgrade. He just does it in an AoE for free, always. Actually better, because you get shielded. The damage output is great, obviously, that you've already pretty much covered that ground. It just feels like when you're playing him, there's really no opportunity cost to anything you're doing. Like, you're not giving anything up. You're not even when he summons, you're not spending an action to summon. You're like concentrating or walking, plus creating a dude. Plus you're removing a marker. Everything he does, he just does really, really well. I think that this is definitely where a model that I would think is a candidate for pretty significant nerfs. The reason I'd rank him above Sonnia is that his plan is much more immediate and proactive. With Sonnia, your opponent has maybe options with marker removal, maybe they have condition removal, maybe they have this ability to kind of like do stuff before the board becomes so cluttered that that they really can no longer operate. Dashel is like in your face immediately and extremely hard to remove, and as long as he's in your face, he's just removing your best models.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with all of that. I will start by saying I think that Dashel and Sonnia are still definitely about the same level. I think Dashel has a game plan that's a bit easier to interact with than Sonnia's is, which is why I don't know that he's strictly better or strictly worse, because I do think his game plan is a bit more powerful when it works. The other thing that I really like about him is, as mentioned, the Soulstone cache for mostly your entire crew. Malifaux Burns is a really aggressive meta where models in the middling cost that don't have hard shut-off defenses, like hard to kill or something, very often can just die before they've activated turn 1 or turn 2. And having stones just changes them, or makes it so your opponent can't just do math and say that a model is dead. And so I find that really, really valuable, and just want to emphasize how much this card I think would only be like maybe B tier if it didn't have that. So if you're playing Dashel and you're not making use of Desperate Measures, I think you're doing it wrong.
I think he'd still be A, but he wouldn't be S.
Yeah.
Right. Second Slice is obviously a really powerful ability, but 6s are 6s, and Break Protocol is dumb. I don't know how it isn't even at least, Master only. Like, we look at Seamus, and Seamus is allowed to take an action, but only if he's the Master or the leader. And this is just like, it does that and more, and draws a card, and summons a dude, and like, I don't know. It's very good.
Yeah.
Like, lots of people will just read this as like target your, totem, draw a card, and summon a dude, and do a thing, and that's not always the best use case of it even, because you can like remove a pyre marker, or remove a coffin marker, or remove a whatever the fuck.
Turn their scheme marker into your scheme marker.
Like, do a thing at the same time. It's really good. There's not too much more to say.
Yeah, I mean,
although we all ignored Grip the Guild.
That's a great point. What I was going to say is I really like Dashel, and the reason that I like him the most, aside from the Soulstone thing with Desperate Measures, which is bonkers, I love Grip of the Guild. I think that Flay is like my favorite trigger in any model that I have in Neverborn, and I never get to use it. But Grip of the Guild, which is just like straight up like basically a 2-inch AoE like auto Flay trigger, is nuts. What?
No, Flay is damage.
Yeah,
Flay is damage. This is their entire action.
No, it's just the attack.
It's just the attack.
It does
And
not apply to
their
the
attack
damage slip.
actions.
It's just the action. The duel.
Oh.
The damage slip is not part of the duel.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good, but it's not, insane.
Interesting. Okay,
You ain't
well,
straight flipping everything.
I take
That would
it
be
back
pretty
then.
sweet, though.
D tier, awful, don't play him.
We should have 2 versions of him. We should have Dashel and then Brandon's version of Dashel.
I like my version of Dashel. It's way better.
I think
You know,
can I
it-
just say?
Dashel goes to like S+.
That is a very common thing I've learned arguing like tier lists or in Malifaux Masters. A lot of people, it's just like, oh man, this thing is horribly, disgustingly strong. I don't know why other people play it. And then I'm like, well, you're reading it wrong.
Often lawyers don't get built-in surge from
Yeah,
Lucius's game
I'm
marker.
sad about that. Whatever.
Yeah. I am kind of
I haven't
like
played it on the table yet.
I'm kind of bemused that giving a friendly model a hazardous aura is like often a very, very powerful thing, and certainly one of the most annoying things you can do. And like none of us even discussed it because it's so far down on the list of like stupid crap that Dashel does.
Yeah. Yep. Because also a lot of time you're just like cut them down, right? Because you're using it on yourself.
Yeah, but you can also use the other one on yourself, and now Dashel's in the middle of your crew, and any attempt to deal with him hurts.
That's true. Yeah, he's very strong.
Oh yeah.
But on to someone who's
there is that someone tried to deal with him and they're already losing if they do that.
On to somebody who's not as strong, which I think is Nellie. I think she's fine. I would just put her somewhere in B. I'm not exactly sure where in B. I don't see her enough to really be like confident in where I would put her. I know that she's better than most people grade it to, because she plays in a weird way that's not just me go face, and a lot of people can't quite handle that necessarily, but overall it's still a pretty solid model. So I'm gonna hesitantly put this around B, Lady J, and Dashel, and just you guys can convince me otherwise, because I'm fine putting her wherever, honestly.
Yeah, I would put her in a high C, and I think it's sort of the same point that I was making about Sonnia. I feel like the game's kind of left her behind a little bit. I think Nellie is cool, but I'm also looking at sort of the way we categorize these as like specific strengths and narrow strengths. I think Nellie does have strengths. I think they're somewhat narrow. It is much more likely now that that her models just die. I mean, journalists are not super fragile. They often have some kind of defensive tech, but the game is really dangerous right now. And like exclusive interview is a cool ability. It's a really strong ability. It's not nearly as strong as it was when Corrupted Idols was in the pool. I think that Nellie is cool. I think that at least for Nellie 1, I would say she's a C, just because the stuff that she's really good at does seem to be in kind of a narrow application, and her crew is a little bit like the fact that her crew doesn't kill things that fast aside from her herself. And yes, she can do a lot of damage personally. I know that. Is more of a liability than it used to be.
I have to still throw this in B just because of what the model is able to do. Like, I could be talked down to C if we were in like a specific gaining ground where a lot of her abilities don't have value, but it plays well into a reasonable number of the schemes. In a hypothetical gaining grounds later, that could even become much more powerful to the point where I'd put her in A. And so far that the fact that she is self-healing whenever she does the thing that she wants to do without any flips, don't mind me, and reasonable stats across the board, means that she does come into the game with a reasonably difficult to interact with plan to score points. You don't really take a lot of her keyword because a lot of her keyword is pretty dog water. So you'll see her with a lot more of the Guild All-Stars to try and actually interact with the enemy game plan, rather than, reinforce your own game plan with the keyword. But the point is that she does a reasonable amount of scoring pretty well by herself, and then you can solve for the opponent with the rest of your hires, which, also lets you play list chicken a bit because your opponent doesn't really know what you're bringing when you declare Nellie.
Yeah, I think I agree on B. I think that she definitely has strengths in scheme pools that are in scheme pools that are very schemy or very, very sort of interacty. There's a lot that she can do there, but I think that she does really suffer in very killy ones. So you do sort of have that. I like how you put it, list chicken. That's funny. Well, whether you're gonna have Nellie 1 or Nellie 2, because they are crazy different. But yeah, I agree. I think I agree with B.
Yeah. And while they might be crazy different, I do have to say I do think Nellie 1 is just, it's obviously just better in my mind. I could pretty easily slap her in A. I've now gotten to see enough of like what her crew looks like, and particularly like the Russians on Vassal were convincing me that they were better, and I was never quite sure. And then I started seeing it, and I'm like, oh yeah, you can do some really insane things with her new model she got.
Mm-hmm.
The whole placing pretty much anywhere on the board with false reality, like it can get a little nutty in what she's able to do. For to, just controlling a board. And then overall, her damage is interesting, and her card resources is also pretty decent. Obviously, just being able to draw 2 cards with your bonus action is strong. So I think she's pretty easy A. I think probably a little bit weaker than Perdita, because Perdita does do whole open board, shoot, kill everything, whereas this is a little bit more strategically playing around, and that's always a little bit harder to do, and is a little bit harder to see where the top tier is and where like the middle of the pack on how actually good it is. So I'm going to hesitantly put it a little bit below Perdita, and believe I've seen what the top tier is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my initial instinct is like high B, low A. I have not seen what the Russian meta is doing with her, and I'd actually be really interested to hear it from you. But I have played her, and she did not seem strong when I was hiring, and she surprised me on the table. I was really happy with her. False reality is nuts. Like the fact that you can just sort of like control X a model and then control V it wherever on the board you want, and then just immediately interact or make an attack or do whatever, means that a lot of the time you can do something that your opponent, and especially since a lot of her models have Don't Mind Me, you could just do something your opponent can't really do anything about or stop you from doing. August Heart is also obviously awesome if you can stack a bunch of distracted on him, and she's really good at that. I think that she still has exclusive interview, which is really strong. Obviously, she has some, I think, pretty reasonable defensive tech, and you also have the fun little mini game of like maximizing the condition value you can get, which is pretty cool. I think that she's really good. Low A, high B, but I do want to hear what the Russians are doing with her.
I think a lot of it was just like spamming distracted, using SoCast in order to get that stuff. And this distract is just such an amazing condition right now, because I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but a lot of crews have been focusing on getting like good, strong, like focus attacks to pick off certain models. And now that you can never have focus while having distracted, it's just made Nellie in general just so much better.
Yeah, for sure. I was ready to put her in B tier, but I was also thinking, what if she's A tier? And when I think about it more, a lot of the things that I like in Masters, she does pretty well. Like, she has out of activation movement on False Reality. She's low card burden, and she in fact draws you probably more cards than she uses in her average activation. And yeah, like the kind of movement you get off of one False Reality, even if it's just like lunacy one of your journalists, False Reality them, and then hit the trigger, right? That's a 4-inch place followed by typically a 5-inch move, right? That's a lot of movement for 1 AP.
That's actually a 6-inch place.
2 plus twice the distracted condition. Lunacy is distracted 2. Why is it 6 inches?
Because 2 plus twice 2 is 6.
2 plus twice 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, a 6-inch, you get a leap plus a 5-inch walk plus base size, really. So you're displacing that model by
You can get 12 inches.
a lot for 1 AP. And it's usually going to be more than distracted 2, I think, depending on what model you're doing it to. So yeah, I think I'm reasonably comfortable with A for that. And the fact that she also just gives a little bit of extra power to Newsy, my favorite bad good model in the game, really tickles me.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a Newsy in person.
I've
But,
had Lynch die to Newsies.
Oh no, I think A is a pretty good spot. She has a lot of really neat abilities. False Reality obviously is busted. I really like So Chaos too. I mean, it's an unresistible, uninteractable thingy there. Yeah.
And no TNs.
With no TN. There's no TN. It just happens. 8 inches, which isn't great, but like 8 inches obey, just fucking do it. That's, I mean, non-charge, but still. Yeah, it's real good.
Yeah, the last game I played with Nellie, her activation on turn 4 was activate, fling August Heart 18 inches away up the board, target my opponent's Corvus Rook with False Reality, cheat in the 13 masks, place him in base contact with my opponent's Vernon and Wells, cash in one of his distracted for a plus twist on the hit, price of progress for the execute trigger, punch and execute his own Vernon and Wells, and he conceded.
Yeah,
it felt like
she can just do nutty things. I
felt
really,
like a good use
really
of 2 AP.
And that example is also why I think like she's A tier, and a lot of people can look and be like, look in hiring you kind of like, oh, it feels B tier. I actually think she can be higher than A tier if you really unlock it, like you big brain Nellie, because she can do so many interesting things and has such a weird, strong control of the board that it's just going to take a lot of play to get really good with her. But I think if you like you end up like soloing this master, which I think is very doable, you could really show what she's truly capable of, which might be above what I think, but
yeah,
I think it's strong.
On like Yanlo 1 tier right now.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just so weird that Yanlo 1 is not top tier anymore.
All right, let's see who's next.
Lucius Mattheson, which we are going to have some contention over. I hate this model. I think it's trash. I'm not actually going to put it in D, but I think it's a pretty. I think Lucius 1 in my mind is a pretty easy C, and now we get to fight over it. So tell me why we're wrong.
We're gonna.
No, I'm not gonna. I think Lucius 1 is pretty freaking bad. It's a shame. I think he's a cool concept for a model. I think that the problem is that like lawyers are good, but they're just doing the thing that he's doing. Except, at like not a master level. But I don't know, just like the keyword suffers from a lack of dudes that you really like that are really awesome to issue command on. Like a lot of the times you're hiring lawyers out of keywords so you can obey good models.
Yeah.
And Lucius is just like he's so low impact, and he's not that hard to kill, and he's not that impactful. And just like what I was saying with Sonnia too, how it's very hard to have a bad activation with her because she's always doing great stuff. It's pretty easy to have a bad activation with Lucius.
But like, Sam, what if you just walk with your master a lot?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, his bonus action is an enemy only 6-inch like attack. Like he has 3
comes
AP.
on a totem, and it's not good on the totem.
Yeah, it's just oh my god. Like there's so much stuff on him that like just is again the dials are set to a very safe position. I do not like this man. I do not like him.
Yeah, why is he stat 5? He's so resource intensive. I mean, don't get me wrong, he obviously the crew generates resources, but he's stat 5. None of his stuff successfully does anything, and his whole elite and mimic crew. I mean, I know some people stan Agent 47, but realistically, the whole keyword kind of sucks in keyword. You just take them lawyers out and forget that they're elite. They're cost 7 models, and you're just fine with that. You just forget this keyword.
You can do silly things when you hire like the lone marshal in Agent 46 and like a doppelganger or whatever, but even that is more cute than good.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
There are a lot of cute things, but yeah.
It is.
I want to fight you first on the idea that he's high card burden. Lucius is definitely low card burden. He usually will draw you more cards than he takes on his activation. Mm-hmm. That is his one saving grace, is that this guy usually by virtue of being on the table is like +5ing your hand. Because he comes with Arcane Reservoir. If your opponent is using any pass tokens, or you're using any pass tokens, you draw cards. Pass tokens are a lot more prevalent in the game than they used to be, so you're probably getting at least a card a turn off of that in most games. Unless for some weird reason you and your opponent have the exact same model count, and neither of you kills each other.
I mean, I would say you probably do it 2 or 3 times, because all your models die.
Right, exactly.
Point of order, he's low card burden because you don't want to waste good cards on his crappy actions.
Look, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but the point is that he's low card burden, not, a master that needs a lot of cards.
Well, he needs the high cards was what I was trying to say with his low stats. He doesn't
need the high cards, he just flips 5s. Anyways.
Just only issue command, fair.
You're next leveling it by not caring if you miss with your fancy cane, and therefore not needing to cheat.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone use Fancy Cane.
Why does that have 3 triggers? Why does that attack have 3
Lucius is the only crew in the game that you can have 5 separate models with a Fancy Cane action. Can I just say?
Yeah.
I'm just saying make Lucius's Fancy Cane stat 8 and he still is not taking it.
I think if you find the right minion or the right scalpel for the tool or for the game, you might be able to get reasonable value out of him. But I do agree, he's like C to D tier. I don't know, C might be a bit generous, but that's just because his keyword sucks.
All right, I'm gonna blow this case wide open. Lucius 1 S tier. Here's why. Okay, so it has forever been said that the person who takes the most walk actions in a game loses, right? But if you think about it this way, if you could just walk every turn 3 times with your master, and you got to move like 2 other models, maybe.
You know what? I'm gonna say this. Do you think you can have a hand size greater than 7? Because that's how Lucius is good. Then you just have a hand of 13 cards. That would make him good.
Think about it
unlimited
this
hand
way.
size.
Think about it this way. If you also just stick that Arcanist upgrade on him.
First of all, that Arcane Reservoir is worded to not stack. Second of all, Brandon, I looked it up. You can only have 2 fancy canes in a Lucius crew, but you can actually have 5 fancy canes in a Seamus crew.
Mimic.
Once again,
Mimic.
Once again,
Thank you.
Resurrectionist.
Mimic.
Resurrectionist superiority.
Mimic. Okay. Yeah. So I think no, it's a D. No, maybe C.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I think Lucius is one of those. No,
Anyone
to be
in
honest,
this faction is D. It's Lucius.
I agree completely.
And I don't think there are any other Ds.
I think that
Lucius too.
I honestly I think D is probably a safe bet. I do think that he gains a good amount of legs just because of the stuff that you can copy in Neverborn, and he just seems a little bit more toothy. But in Guild, I would not play Lucius one.
Yeah. I'm going to put him in D for the memes. I think he actually can almost get there. I don't see it any way you
well, so
this model.
my argument for D is that in addition to all of the other lack of luster that's going on here, he's such a high skill cap master. Like, you really need to know, because there are so many things that you have to do to play his crew well. In terms of issuing commands and moving things around and out of order sequencing. I just think that it is, unless you know exactly what you're doing and know the game excruciatingly well, I just don't see you piloting Lucius well, and for that reason, I really do think D probably is you need to like pass an exam on Malifaux before you can consider Lucius above a D tier master.
Yeah. Moving on, and to have the fight I've been having with Landon for a while, I'm going to put. This is a hard one for me. I'm going to put Lucius to the Dishonorable into the maybe high C. I'm going to tentatively put him in B. In my mind right now, the only time I'm ever playing this model, admittedly, and why I could probably be talking to C or even a weirder tier list is I would hire this model in another keyword, and that would probably be it. I don't want to play in Lucius's keyword. I don't like his models. I like this card, though, mostly because it has a lot of really nice tech on it. I mean, the fact that he's stat 6/7 is always nice. Flexible morality is amazing. He also has a pseudo armor and superiority complex. For example, if you're hiring him in like Sonnia and they all have burning, armor. Ruthless is always good, and the planning ahead ability is really nice when you're playing in crews that already want to hire 2 guild lawyers. Because you can use it to build in the mask for their obeys. They can be obeying each other. His bonus action can obey them, so you can actually get a lot of card draw, because if a lawyer obeys a lawyer, you can still draw a card off of that. And I think that allows it to generate enough nice resources with models you're already hiring in some of these crews. And then on top of that, Secret Passage, as we know from Seamus, is just really good. And Secret Passage, giving out auto staggered to allow you to take plus the damage flips on your stat 7 attack that has 3 pretty nice triggers on it, is going to be really nice, especially with that ignore, hard to kill, and demise. It'll be a decent tech pick when you can have double masters in specific crews. So I'm a bigger fan of this than maybe it deserves. I know a lot of people talking about it actually love this model and would rate it higher. I don't see that, mostly because of how terrible the crew is. I'm rating it this high because I see it's a nice potential in a double masters, where, especially in ban format that I've consistently am pushing everywhere, where they're going to ban augmented, and then you can fall back on Lucius 2 as your second as a double master. You can't hire Hoff, because the correct answer will be Hoff 2 for basically any other decision.
I'm feeling very validated by the fact that a player of your caliber is saying the stuff that's like literally exactly what I was going to say. I would actually go further than you. I would put him in B, and I would put him between Dashel and Nellie in B, because, and the only reason I'd put him that low is because his keyword like absolutely blows. But if he had a real keyword, like, oh my god, he might even be A if he had a real keyword. Now we can't like obviously like do kind of counterfactuals like that. But he's like, this card is awesome. Like, Secret Passage is amazing. You know what's even better than Secret Passage is Secret Passage that like hands out a really debilitating condition that he also has incidental synergy with. I think just a lot of the reason I like this card so much is that a lot of what Lucius does is stuff that it kind of really doesn't matter what your opponent is doing. Like, he's very accurate because he's stat 7. So as long as you have a reasonable hand, you can hit if you need to. And you know, there's no TN to resist sudden appearance. Your opponent can't stop you from secret passaging. You are just going to show up and you're going to punch people. And even if you don't have any other models in your crew, it is keyword. At the very minimum, you're helping yourself scheme and you're building in crit strike. And like that's a really good place to be. So I think this guy's great. I think he's great for pretty much the reasons you said.
Yeah, I really love the fact that you can just in a lot of potentiality where you win turn 1 or win an initiative or something like that, you can drop that scheme marker, pop up on a guy because you know he's in range, and just be like, bam, I'm severing you for 7. It can just be sometimes like ridiculously strong. You have to get focused on him, but it's a little more jank, which is why B, but it has the potential to be, something cool.
He's also, I think, given where his stats are and flexible morality and superiority complex, he's not just going to immediately die if you stick him out there.
Landon, why are we wrong?
D for Dogwater. I unironically think this guy is definitely right next to Lucius 1 in the trash bin. So we'll start with he's very high card burden, right? The reason why Secret Passage isn't as bad for Seamus as it is for this model is because Seamus has the Whisper, which just really reduces his card burden by just letting him flip his CNs. You don't have the ability to just like flip your 7s in this crew. You have 6 cards, and if you're Secret Passaging, one of them has to go to Secret Passage most of the time. God help you if you're Secret Passaging more than once in a turn. Secondly, a lot of his power is locked behind triggers, and that means you need a lot of stones. That means you have to use stones. If you're just hitting for 2, 3, 5 at stat 7, you're still minning for 2, right? If you're trying to get the staggered synergy, you either need to use a stone or cheat a specific 7 for the staggered to pulse out to begin with. And even then, if you want any of your damage, well, again, you can't do that because it's not an attack action.
Yeah.
Please.
I gotta remember that.
So then, even if you have the staggered on them, you then have to cheat to hit, cheat the severe, or you're not doing any damage. You're still on that min 2. So you have a lot of resources you have to pump into this model to get the workout. And don't get me wrong, you can get some workout, but I don't think you're always going to have that many resources to dedicate to it. And even if you do on that turn for that activation, you won't have resources for the rest of your crew once you're done with a Lucius turn. The other reason that he's not particularly good at anything, he can do a bunch of different things on the board, and he has a lot of good table flexibility in that regard. However, he's very inefficient, like I said, at moving across the board. It requires a lot of cards for you. He's very inefficient at doing damage. Yes, he can do it, but it costs you severes to get damage out that a lot of other models can just do on like weaks or moderates. And his bonus action, I think, kind of sucks.
Well, I mean...
What else can I say?
Joke's on you, Landon. You don't need resources for the rest of your crew if they're all garbage.
That's true. You don't. I didn't even mention that his crew is complete, absolute garbage because everyone else has already said it. I didn't think it needed reiteration. And then I'll just point out one last thing, is that your defenses, like, yeah, you have high stats, but if you use all your cards proactively, you kind of are just relying on flips to not die. And flexible morality is a defense your opponent has complete control over. And then lastly, the whole he helps your scheming thing. You drop the scheme marker during the start phase. You don't have any finesse and like trying to trick your opponent with the marker. It's like you're going to score. You either put it in the scoring position and give him an entire turn to answer it, or you put it in a spot where you can use your ability. It will very rarely do both.
So hearing what you've said, I think I disagree. I think by the definition of what we've laid out by the tiers, I do really think that he's in an A tier. And I don't necessarily think that he is better than anyone we have in B tier. I think that he probably isn't, to be fair. But I just think that he has a lot that he can do. And him himself is very flexible. His crew definitely weighs him down a bit. So maybe like if again, as everyone said, if his crew got an update, maybe he would be aggressively A tier. But I think that he can survive in pretty much any conditions. I think that he can murder things if you need him to. He can scheme if he needs to. He's a master that can blip around the board, which really is just super, super powerful. Maybe I'm looking at Lucius with rose tinted glasses, but I really like Lucius too.
So we have 1A, 1D, and 2 Bs, one of which is somewhat more reluctant than the other.
I'm going to reiterate that I really don't like him by himself in his own crew. So that almost makes me put him like in D tier, low C tier if I had to play him and his crew. I really do think, though, in some of the crews I'm building, that he does turn on as a second master, because Guild, I've always had a problem doing symbols in particular. Sure, you can rely on Mounted Guard. They're not great at it. So I really like him being able to go and get the strats. And then if you have the good hand, you can just decide to just absolutely murder a guy. And if you don't have the good hand, you can use that on the rest of your crew, which is one of the reasons I really like him in Sonnia, because I'm never using the scheme marker really to ever actually be a scheme marker. I'm using it as the fact that I now will have one actual obey with a 9 now on lawyers, which is pretty huge if you're playing Sonnia and you're obeying thralls, or there's a lot of things that ability alone turns on. And then I think you're more reliable to be able to get a secret passage, along with the fact that his bonus action is probably drawing you a card if you have lawyers in there as well. And I think it can be a decent tier, a second title master. I do think if you're playing him by yourself, I can actually get behind like the D low C.
Yeah, I'd put him in
That
C
sounds
alone.
like a narrow application just by the way you're describing it.
Yeah. Okay. You're selling me on C. I'd put him above Perdita in C though, because if you are hiring him as a second master, then you're probably in a better place than someone who's trying to play Perdita as a first master.
You're right. I'm down for that. I definitely think that is narrow. I think it's a pretty wide narrow, which is hard to say, but you have to be playing with double masters in my mind.
It's a shame because he's really cool, and like the play pattern that he encourages is really freaking cool. But like his keyword just sucks.
Yeah,
like if this guy was in a real keyword, that's a totally different ballgame.
Isn't it hilarious how bad his keyword is, and he has the best model in Guild in it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's part of that is the specific sort of why lawyers are good, but it's also just it kind of sucks.
So I think we said enough about Lucius, and Brandon will have his fever dreams elsewhere.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Let's move on to bass. All about that bass.
I think it's Bass. Is it not Bass? I've always thought
I think it's 100% Bass. I'll never pronounce it that way because I just like singing that song.
How about Basse?
That's Basse.
No.
Basse.
Absolutely not.
Where's Mr. Bazwa going?
I legitimately don't know. I've had some people convince me he's good in specific areas, so that kind of leads me towards like our definition of like narrow C. Like if the map is like has some really hilarious terrain, he can be like ridiculously strong, right? But overall, I really think like the only time I ever like playing this master is in the trap spam list, which is good, but it's good in like specific matchups and in specific pools. And when it is good, though, it is almost S tier good, especially against like some of the top masters have horrible times against it. But overall, he's pretty meh. That I'm leaning towards like low B, high C.
Yeah, I'd put him in C for pretty much the same reason you said. If you're talking about Bass 1 and you're talking about like I'm going to go to this tournament with Bass 1, I'm going to try to win. I'm going to try to play competitively with him. What you're talking about is you're playing the trap list. Because nobody's taking Bass 1 with like, a Rough Rider and a Guild Pathfinder and like Paul Crockett and like a balanced, frontier list. They're going in with the stupid trap list or they're playing something else. And that's by definition kind of a narrow thing, a narrow build. I think he's cool. There's like cool stuff on his card. His gun's totally sweet. I like it when Mad Dog has it, but yeah, I mean, he's another model he's kind of let down by his keyword.
I kind of disagree with that, actually. I put him in high B. I actually like him better than most of the models we have in B right now, but I wouldn't put him to A, I don't think. I think there's two lists you can play with him, which is perhaps where the distinction comes from in our minds. There's the trap list, which you can play, and then I think he also plays, perhaps the title encourages is a bit better, and that's where we're differing, is that I'm thinking of him independently from his title existing. Is that you can take him, the Sandworm, Reichart, and then just have like a solid front line that you deploy on wedge like 7 to 8 inches from your opponent's deployment zone, and just charge the Sandworm in activation 1, snipe a model, bury the Sandworm, and then just have 2 tanky bros that will never die standing there to do more disruption afterwards. It's a very aggressive list that you can catch people off guard with, especially if they're playing something a bit more on the setup side that requires a bit more of an unpack. And so I think the fact that you can either punish people who want to play aggressively with traps or punish people who want to dirtle with the switch of aggro gives him a very interesting thing where if you can just read hiring pretty well, he becomes a very valuable master to be able to drop. And I think the title has some of the similar strengths that we'll talk about when we'll, get to that.
I'm sort of feeling.
Not to mention he's got good boards. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sort of feeling high C, low B. High C, low B. His markers are neat. The trap list is super memey, and he like I'm just not convinced how good Home on the Range is. I mean, it probably is good, but like you're not gonna build a list around getting to deploy up front because like what does that really do for you? I don't know. He seems like a neat package, but overall a little underwhelming and almost like he really just sort of shoehorns himself into, one thing. He feels like less good Titania. That's how I sort of interpret Basse.
Yeah, like the Sandworm is good, Reichert is good, but he does feel like he has a pretty strong drop off in his keyword once you hire the stuff that you always hire.
I do really like Reichert. He's neat.
Yeah, he's great.
I'll give him the low B mainly because I think Landon's right. I'm looking too much into the second title, which I guess we'll go to now because most of the time I think the title is just the correct pick for Basse. The other version of the list I think works better with the title. I really like the whole ignore concealment because that was one of the bigger problems with some of his models on his whole crew. And I really just think like if you're playing Basse, you're probably going to be playing his title. He even does the trap list. He does the trap list a lot better as well. Marker removal we know has been pretty good, and as well as the fact that he also does condition removal, which is pretty huge. So most of the time I'm leaning towards this guy. I really love the Twisting Tornado Shockwave. Normally I am not a fan of shockwaves, but the whole Dust Clouds and Dust Clouds can't be removed stuff is, I don't know. It's really good.
I think
it's a 50 mil shockwave. Too.
It's not that they can't be removed. It's just that they don't pop in the end phase.
Right. They don't get removed at end phase like they're normally done. As long as they're within one of the Friendly Frontier model.
Yeah. Also, they're not destructible.
Yeah. So they pretty much don't get removed now.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely like that. So where would you put the title?
Yeah, I would almost do low A, high B.
Agreed. A.
Yeah, I actually really like this, and I think even with like him being the head of the trap list, it's actually just a lot better. Like he does a lot of things good, and you just can't deny like how amazing his melee is, because just being able to give stun to a model, it can just be the most debilitating thing in the game. Like so many models rely on triggers nowadays, and having a stat 6 versus move, where most models are move 5, and giving out staggered is not necessarily even that hard in this crew.
He has an unresistible pulse staggered. So
on a really good ability, which is challenge. Well, you have to win challenge.
Sure, but it's a stat 7.
If only there were another.
Not enemy only.
It's not enemy only, but you can't target yourself.
If only there were another guild model master that had an unresistible pulse stagger. If only.
Yeah. As a second master would actually be not. It would be not great.
Not good.
But not the worst, because the crew does suffer from being able to run around and pick up strategy markers while they hold them in their deployment zone. But
I don't think it does.
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, because frontiersmen and guards do that pretty well.
My instinct on Basse too going into this was high B. And I think I'm willing to give him low A. Like I haven't seen Basse 2 very much, so I think that definitely I haven't seen him kind of unlock to his potential. But just the on card synergy between 1,000-yard stare and shackles is really good. Also, you didn't even mention wanted posters, which sometimes does nothing and sometimes just like owns your opponent.
That's true.
Yeah, wanted posters there are some crews that just like look at wanted posters and just like throw up their hands and start crying. Like that ability rules. So yeah, I mean, he has a bunch of like weird incidental little tech, like the fact that his gun ignores hard to kill, like usually doesn't matter. Sometimes it does. He like removes conditions. staggers. He just does a bunch of individual things where you're probably not going to use all the text on his card in any given game, but it's pretty rare that you will not use any of the text on his card, and he's just out there making attacks. That's pretty uncommon. So yeah, I'm willing to give high B, low A.
Yeah, he's real good. For the reasons that I was saying that Bass 1 has 2 lists, like Bass 2 just also plays those lists. And I do think both patterns of that list are good. And I do think that both patterns of that list are viable with both masters. So I'm going to oddly spend more time talking about Bass 1 here, in that I think you guys just kind of ignore how good Caught in Quicksand is, and that it's stat 7 versus move and applies injured for the rest of your crew, and that it lets you just kidnap and kill tanky models, in that, you know, it is not only injured and an attack against movement, but also places the model an indeterminate number of inches, the worst of which is usually like a dust cloud marker. But going back to Bass 2, you know, if they're playing a faction that you can't move, you just kind of go to them and you just shackle the shit out of them. And as mentioned, like, Shackles is a very strong ability. He's a very tanky model with defense 6 hard to wound armor, which we haven't said at all this time because it's basically on every guild title. It's really gross. I do want to point out
the armor is not on
there's
him.
a bit of the Nambo with Pearl. Pearl's a really strong model. I was amused that people said you run out of good models when you have, you know, Pearl, you have the Henchman, you have the
That's true. I was forgetting Pearl.
And then you still have like Ostringers, which are reasonably good models. I don't think you ever kill an Ostringer in less than 3 hits. Yeah, but they're among the tankiest 7-stone models in the game, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, they've got that.
And then they also don't have to play in line of sight to get pressure on your opponent. You can just kind of use them to score points while also doing damage. I don't know. I could talk about them for a while. But yeah, he gives marker removal, like everyone else said. He has tech. He's good. He's A.
Yeah, I think the marker removal and the fact that his Dust Bowl stuff is just, you know, he gets to keep his markers down. That enables such a heavy world of scoring, because you know, normally Dust Clouds remove at the beginning of the end phase, which means that they can't be used for scoring ever. Outside of the one that scores immediately. Deathbeds, thanks. You know, I just think that opens up such a more versatile, well-rounded effect for his crew, that I think that putting him in playable in all pools, maybe not even high A, but I think he's quite good.
Yeah, I don't think he's above Nellie or Perdita, but I think he's I think he's defensible.
Yeah, but he can handle. I think Bass 2 can handle almost anything. You can really play him wherever you want.
I love the interaction between 1,000-Yard Stare and Shackles. It's so mean.
I will say his trigger name game is on point in both versions. 1,000-Yard Stare, High Noon, Sandworm. You know, there's an exclamation and a question. It's great.
I keep thinking he has Perdita 2's anti-healing bullets, and I know he doesn't, but
if he did, that would be amazing.
That would be ridiculous. It's one of those things that's like lodged in my brain now, and even though I know it's wrong, it's never gonna leave.
Oh, it's like Santiago and Hard to Kill for me. Someone planted that seed in my brain. I can't forget it.
You know why people think that is because Raphael has it.
Oh, that's got to be it.
That's it. That's literally it. It's because Raphael has it.
All right.
Yeah, I just really want to point out, though, again, like, Shelter from the Storm, which is such a needed thing on his card, and the reason I'm not the biggest fan of Bass 1 is because you have all these, like, decent guns with plus flips, and you're like, well, the plus flips ignore concealing. Well, now they're actually just plus flips. So
yeah, the plus flips aren't for ignoring concealing. The plus flips are for letting you hit with the stat 5 guy.
Yes, exactly. And the fact that they got so screwed by your own, you know, dust cloud markers sometimes is just, like, was wonky.
Yeah, it was always
just
weird
being
to me.
Fixed is nice.
It's weird to me that the crew doesn't natively have text like friendly frontier models ignore these dust clouds.
Yeah,
because a lot of other crews that have similar effects have something like that built in.
Yeah, they ignore the severe terrain part, not the concealment. They fixed it with the title. That's why the title's better, among other things. But yeah.
All
right, we are on our last master, and I think honestly, probably some of the least controversial stuff we can do. I think Hoff 1, he's been shown, he's true and tested. You might not see him as much anymore. He's definitely a bit weaker in Guild than he is in Arcanist, but it's pretty hard for me not to just still put him in A. I probably above base. I'll put him below Nellie for now, but just because he can't have a Soulstone using Peacekeeper. He's good. He'll always be good. He was the original OG before titles that went, oh, what's the thing that countered me? Armor? Yeah, sure, I stopped that now. And he'll always be pretty decent.
Yeah, I don't have really much to add to that. I mean, everyone who's played Malifaux against Hoffman knows how good he is and knows why he's good. He's an A.
Landon will convince me he's S tier always because he has a hard tilt against Hoffman, but I think
I think
Hoff
enough
1
of this
and Guild
preamble
is
bullshit. Hoff 1 is S tier. Hoff 1 in
No.
every version is S tier. He's gotten impossible to interact with game plan. Impossible might be overselling, but screw it. This is my jam. He gets to have such amazing threat ranges that you'll never see from any of these other masters, really. Just with like core putting out focus, or fast peacekeepers, or fast Langstons getting obeyed up the board by lawyers. He's low card burden. You might say, oh, but he's got a bunch of TNs. Yeah, but he's on plus flips to hit sixes. You hit that a lot of the time. He has a lot of great movement tricks that you'll just have. Movement tricks are always good. Out of activation, movement's better. He has both. Like, he's still really good, and he just AP transfers to the best model in your crew and makes it good. And then the way you deal with Tim in fighting is that you try to go through armor, and then he just says no, and also I heal.
Yeah,
I mean, without Temper Steel, that's a different ballgame. But Temper Steel means there's a floor on how bad he can be.
I think that he just is a very well-rounded master. I think that he can do what he wants, and having a whole crew basically armor 2 is just wild.
I'm still gonna. I don't think I've been talked out of A yet, unless someone really wants to commit to that.
I don't think so. I think there are circumstances where he's not great. I mean, he is to take advantage of Power Nexus. He really needs to sort of bubble up, at least at the beginning, and there are crews that can disrupt that and put him. I mean, if I knew that my opponent was declaring Hoffman, Pandora is an auto take, and I think that I just don't lose that game ever. Right.
Yeah. For me, he's just countered by too many of the top tier.
All right, Landon, you're on.
For me, he's just countered by too many of the top tier S tier masters, kind of in my mind. Like, Sonnia makes him really sad with the whole like models not being able to ignore severe, and just he ends up actually being a decent amount slow.
But you can just
and he does suffer from some other similar problems where I think he just got power corrupt a little bit. Still, obviously, really strong. Lawyers are really nice, but are still, 9s in the crew.
He got power crept out of S tier into A tier.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, it's kind of funny, but I think that did happen.
I mean, power creep is. I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but I just think that a lot of the things that, like, there's a lot more stuff in the game that punishes you now for doing things that you didn't get punished for before. Like, if you're too reliant on markers, there's more marker removal. If you're too reliant on bubbling, there's a lot more stuff that punishes you for bubbling. I don't think it's necessarily that it's stronger. It's just that these were play strategies that did not have a counter before and now do. But of course, there is some power creep if we're looking at our S tier masters here.
Yeah. I think you're right. There's a lot more stall, and Hoffman was always kind of weak to stall. So Yan Lo, Hole in the World now, being on his gun. The being buried by Lady J, having ping damage from Dashel, like there's enough like new like text around like what he wanted to do, where like he no longer is consistently able to just be able to like fast guy, get him focused with toolkit, some power tokens, shove him up the mid, and then just watch him die. That's just not as viable of a play strategy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
So in order to fix that, they made Hoff 2, and they gave him a 12-inch laser that does 4 reducible damage. So here we go. Slap him in S tier. This laser is just ridiculous. I don't understand it. He can be hireable in basically any other crew as a second master because everything he does is standalone on his card. Honestly, he's even more standalone in my mind because now you can play around the pylon markers more for getting shielded power tokens. I don't know why they give shielded to all these armor 2 models he has, but they do. So this actually allows you to not have to play the bubble up you were talking about for Hoff 1. You're able to spread out a lot more and then just control the board with this giant 12-inch fucking laser that not only kills you, but sometimes gives more power tokens. Also, they put electroshock on his melee, which also keeps I don't know what that thing.
Yeah, everything about this model is silly as hell. I mean, the fun thing is that, like, as excited as we're getting about him now, that's nothing to when we cover him again in Arcanists. which is just
Yeah.
idiotic. But
Yeah.
like, yeah,
You
this
know,
model.
I'm going to disagree with you. This is the only contention we can have over this model because he's too objectively good
Well,
on his card.
just wait for my hot take, but please
Okay.
continue.
I actually am starting to like him more in Guild for one specific reason, and that reason is lawyers. The problem he has in Arcanist is Arcane Reservoir is not enough card draw to be good enough. Stat 6, while amazing on defense, does normally mean you tie most of the time. His crew became more reliant on that actually landing, and in order to do that, you actually need those 13s. How do you get 13s? Tools for the job, broken ability. And that's what really turns him on in Guild as a master, because he doesn't need his crew anymore, and he doesn't even need the extra card in hand, nor does he need Soulstone use on Peacekeeper anymore. You can just having Laugh Off actually is sometimes just better, and it's I think he has actually a really high potential in Guild that's overlooked because of just how long it was and how easy it used to be able to say Hoffman's better in Arcanist. I think now he has a good potential to be better in Guild.
And
All right,
I think that's all very well and good, but I wasn't even talking about hiring him as a master in Guild. I was talking about hiring him into Mayfang.
Oh yeah, I've made enough comments about it that's like utterly hilariously broken.
Yeah, but yes,
I'm with
he's
you.
just
What?
great.
Are
He's
you
great
are you
for
saying
all
that there's a problem with obeying a master to take alternating current multiple times per turn?
I will say this, as a person who has ran that crew a bunch, yes, it's a stat 9 card, and as we went over, there's no card draw in that crew. So you're actually pretty limited on the cards in hand you have. If you drew a God Hand, you're unbeatable, literally unbeatable. You're going to pop a model 8 damage off the board that kills a decent amount of henchmen that are reliable, and you're able to probably hit a couple other people to lower them as well, while also pinging them down with Mei Fang, which is just ridiculously strong. That being said, you don't have the cards for it. You just don't.
I mean, she's also giving him like 2 focus per turn.
All right, let me blow your mind with the dumb meme list. On my end, you hire December Acolytes for tools, where you put him in Raspies. It's summon December Acolytes for tools.
I'm not against that.
You don't have to have December Acolytes take any actions the whole game. They just pretend they're discount lawyers.
I am 100% behind that. The only
because that's what lawyers do anyways for 1 stone less.
Yeah.
Lawyers sometimes draw a card off shield.
Yeah.
Also just do a broken obey sometimes.
I'm allergic to broken masters.
Yeah. I will say
am too.
it's wild that in all of the things that we've talked about, nobody has mentioned Bulldoze yet, I think.
Oh, I was going to mention it when it was my
please.
turn.
Oh,
I don't
I'm
know
sorry.
if it's my turn yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
It is now.
Okay. Well, you see, one of the things that I really hate about all the S tier masters that I like put into S tier is that they're entirely impossible to interact with. So let's try and figure out how you meaningfully interact with Hoffman Inventor. Let's go down the list, all right? Well, can we engage him? Well, his alternating current doesn't have a gun, so that doesn't stop you from getting engaged. And Bulldoze gets you out of engagement. It doesn't matter if you're going to, put models in front of him, put terrain in front of him, put Severe under him. Bulldoze just gets you out of jail for free. I mean, you have to flip a 5, but, you want to take this action anyways to build a pylon every turn. So there's no way to penalize his movement on the board, because his action just says he goes where he wants. And then sometimes you also take damage. Then, you can't stop him from alternating current. You can get plus flips to get through neg flip defenses. He doesn't have to have plus flips if you've got something dumb like Bluff Thief. And I mean, his markers are indestructible, so you can't really interact with it there. If you do have marker removal, if you're too close, it just does damage back to you, and he makes more to begin with. If you try to engage him in melee, he might just Construction Claw yeet you away, even, because his melee attack's really strong. Like a 2/4/5 where you can get built-in positives to damage or stun and injured that also does a place for no fucking reason. I was making a concentrated effort not to swear, but I don't care. This makes me that angry. And then he
that's
also
like
just
7
draws
inches of
cards.
displacement.
This model is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of stuff in Malifaux.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think we've covered almost every reason.
If this is an ordered tier list, you have placed him wrong. He's supposed to be above that S.
No. I think Lady Justice is still better, but
I
boy,
think
is
you're
it close.
entirely wrong, but that's fine. You're entitled to be wrong.
Yeah, I think Lady Justice is only slightly better because it's hilariously kind of the counter to him because it's the burying him is the one tech around him, and then replacing him wherever you want him. I do think there are better masters than Hoffman who can fight him. It's the fact that it's like it doesn't matter though what you hire, right? And that's one of the reasons he's S tier and also like super annoying to play against is because you feel like no matter what you have to play his game, no other choice around it.
You don't even get to play his game. He just plays his game, and then you try and figure out what to do because you can't interact with his game.
Well, realistically, you hope he just didn't drew high cards, and that happens. I've played enough Hoff where I just don't draw the high cards, never
Well, then
land
he can
a
still
laser.
just score points.
You'd be surprised. He's still slow.
Yeah, I mean, insofar as he has a weakness, it's that he can't Zorch a single model for more than 4 damage in a single turn, so you can try to sort of stay on top of it. But boy, that's
melee.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing is it's like that's first of all really not much of a consolation, and second of all, 4 damage is a lot.
Yeah, easiest nerf in my life is slapping a gun and alternating current. It makes the model like you have to have some brain to play around like certain things.
No, you just have to flip a 5 and then scoot out.
Well, and then not have him be in friendly fire, maybe.
Then cover as well.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, I mean, I agree.
Well, it's literally the easiest nerf to make him like a good A tier master that's healthy for the meta instead of like just the disgustingness he is right now.
I think a fun series for us to do sort of at some point in the future is go through once we're done with this and look at everything we put in S and be like, what needs to change to make these A tier masters?
Yeah, so we don't end up with Nexus 1 again where it's like, oh cool, I'm never playing that model ever again. Because that's what I always worry about whenever I talk about how amazing some masters are. It's like I'm just worried I'm going to get them nerfed in the ground, and that's happened before, and I don't want that to happen again.
I mean, look, you're a very good player. I don't think that Weird was waiting to nerf Nexus based on what you thought. I think that they made their decision for the reason they made their decision.
Sure, but I'm just saying they definitely overdid it.
Yeah, no, they overcorrected a little bit on her.
Well,
all right, so here's our final list. Oh wait, Brandon.
Yeah,
What's up? Did you get your say in on Hoff?
No, I think we covered everything that there was to cover. I mean, he's bonkers. He's really good. If you don't have AoE blanket market removal, I don't know how you play against this guy without losing. And I am a Neverborn player, so I have blanket AoE market removal. So to me, I literally if I'm playing against a guild or an Arcanist player and the pool can bear it, Hoffman has such a strong effect on my decision making that. If I don't just auto lose by declaring Pandora, and you're playing blue or red, I just choose Pandora.
You're a Neverborn player. Isn't your literal only option Pandora and maybe Dreamer?
No, I play everything except for Lucius.
Okay. We'll get to that. That's some hot takes spoilers for our future episode. But let's
just wait until I explain how Euripides is D tier and how Titania's S tier.
Oh man,
it's gonna be wild. It's gonna be a wild episode.
These takes are igniting.
I'm excited for that. So versatile models. I think Guild is like the easiest one. I almost want to say Guild Lawyer 3 times. I'll say it 2 times because I think that's realistically how many Guild Lawyers you want to have in a good amount of crews at the moment. And then Guild Mage is really strong. If you're forcing me to pick a third one, Pale Riders, bonkers.
Yeah.
But it's definitely Lawyer, Mage, and then some question marks. Depending on what you want. Like Coilers are an interesting spot for hiring sometimes now, but it's Lawyer, Mage, and probably Pale.
Yeah, I'd say Lawyer, Mage, and like comedy option Hoffman too. But given that that's probably not
you're right.
No one's laughing.
Hoffman 2, Lawyer.
Too.
You're correct. I forgot how we made this. In my mind, we're playing bands format and augmented the force band, which allows me to get lawyers in no matter what because Elite's not banned.
Yeah. So I mean, given that that's not sort of the spirit in which this is intended, I would say. Yeah, like Mage Lawyer. I like lawyers. I think it's Mage Lawyer just because I'm really impressed with mages, but I understand that lawyers are probably better. And then my third would actually be like mine's a little spicier than yours, but I really love the Lone Marshal. That guy rules.
You're not wrong.
That's pretty cool take.
The Lone I think the Pale Rider is more sort of like got more general application because Ride With Me is so good, but the Pale Rider's sweet as hell.
Honestly, Pale and Lone. Yeah, Pale and Lone difference literally comes down to can I afford the extra stones or not in my mind.
Yeah, Pale is pricey. But Ride with Me is great. But I don't know. The Lone Marshal, that gun is spicy. Spicy gun.
All right, that's some white boy spice. Let me heat up this kitchen. Jury number 1, bam. Best tech, best point scoring enabler. Guild's biggest problem is that they have a hard time scoring points. Jury lets you score points from multiple angles. Do I believe that entirely? No, I probably think Guild Mage is better because
it does that same
Guild Mage
thing.
also does those same things. But I think those two models are really good for that reason. Lawyer can try and do that, but sometimes you don't want to toss your mask for the obey or cheat your 9. Whereas I think 8's a lot more lenient, and it's
That's why
obviously
you hire
easier to
Lucius
flip it
too.
when you don't need the mask. But I mean, I could be boring and say lawyer for 3rd, but I'm not going to. So obviously it's Guild Mage, it's Jury, and then I will be boring and say Lone Marshal because Lone Marshal is just really good when you
Lone
get
Marshal's
the
fun.
exorcism
I love
trigger
that guy.
off.
Well, I mean, I think I definitely think Guild Mage is number 1. I just marker removal, and just
Condition
to,
removal?
no, just
bunch of
marker
packaging.
removal. That's the only thing I want to remove.
Add focus for
No,
1 wound. I think
No,
what you
just
mean.
marker removal. And Pale Rider, I like Riders. I play with them a lot, especially in Neverborn, and only in Neverborn and nowhere else but Neverborn, but I just really like Riders, and the Guild Rider's pretty ballin'. And then for spot 3, I'm going to say Guild Steward. And the reason I'm going to say Guild Steward is, just kidding, Brutal Emissary.
What?
Yeah, Brutal Emissary. That guy's a boss. Look, can I just say, I have exactly 3 words.
Brandon out of left field.
No. I have 4 words to defend my choice on Brutal Emissary, and here they are. Get in the cage. Thank you for coming.
I thought it was going to be, I want to make dinosaurs.
No, get in the cage. He has a cage for all, and he wants you in it.
I think
hot.
one of
That
those
take.
was definitely the spiciest of all of them.
That's a very hot take. My
I think
favorite
it
thing
was
about the Brutal
Guild Lawyer
Emissary.
twice. That's pretty spicy.
My favorite thing about the Brutal Emissary is that when you look at him, he's very obviously a model from a different game's range. He's just like the scale of him is all messed up.
He's such a neat model, and that's such a cool sword. I love the Brutal Emissary. Obviously, I have him for Kolodi, and by Kolodi I mean Hinamatsu. But sometimes you gotta,
Do we have any lore folks on why this giant skull undead guy is, friends with the guild?
Yeah, so basically what happened is Zoraida made the effigies, which were puppets, and the goal was that they would go out into the factions and spy on them. And when the Governor General did his thing that turned him into the Burning Man,
I thought it was when the cage fell.
No, it's the Burning Man thing. So what happened was when the Governor General did his ritual that was going to turn him into the Burning Man, Zoraida, who had a sense that something like this was going to happen, had prepared this ritual to basically siphon off some of the power from his ascension, because she expected him to try to turn to a tyrant, which is what he was trying to do. She set up a ritual that was supposed to siphon off some of his tyrant power and let her become a tyrant too. She didn't expect him to, instead of becoming a tyrant, become the Burning Man. And so when she started siphoning Burning Man power off of him, she started dying basically because she was absorbing too much energy. And so the puppet network basically acted as a failsafe and absorbed all that energy that had been pouring into her and acted like lightning rods and earthed it. And so that transformed them all into emissaries, which is also incidentally why avatars are gone. Like that was the in-universe explanation for why people can't manifest avatars anymore. And so rather than become spies that were meant to spy on the factions, they became like living embodiments of the ideals represented by that faction. So they are naturally allied with the faction because they exist as sort of magical embodiments of what that faction is all about.
Wow, I didn't actually expect an answer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's from the second edition lore. It's all in the 3rd book.
Specifically, the reason that the Brutal Emissary is an undead dude is because all the guild really wants is you to get in the cage.
I cannot speak to that.
I can.
Yeah, so if you need a reason to go buy the old books, because they're 2nd edition and don't have the right rules, the lore's pretty good.
Yeah, and they go on sale pretty frequently for like $5.
Yeah. Oh, the lore from the 1st edition books is also great. The story puzzle box is still one of my favorite pieces of like lore in a game.
Thanks for listening to our guild tier list review. We have a couple really interesting things. Firstly, there's no, original masters. It's only Malifaux Burns masters in tier 5, and there's only one, which is Hoffman in tier 4. It looks like Hoffman is the clear winner, followed by Lady Justice, Sonnia, and then Dashel. In terms of masters overall keywords that made it out of this tier list, in the best position possible. And thanks a bunch to Badful Haku. You guys were great, and it was awesome talking to you, and I can't wait to do more of these.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm very excited to do more. I think this might also be this is I want to preface this is very weird to have 4 masters in S tier. I think literally only Guild can pull this off.
Yeah,
They're
I
in
think Guild
such
made
a
out
strong
like
spot right
bandits
now.
with Malifaux Burns. They absolutely made out like bandits.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little weird when in Neverborn we have, all 16, but...
I'm going to temper that with, like, the reason why I think Guild gets so many S-tier masters is because they have to pull a lot of work to get the rest of the keywords up to par.
Yes.
So, like, the masters are definitely the front-loaded power of Guild, which in a master hiring format, it's really good because you don't need so much of the dead weight, But, yeah, they're good.
Yeah, so make sure that you guys check out our Discord, which is linked below, as well as Badful Haku's channel, Discord, all of that good stuff. And keep it here on the Danger Planet, where we talk about Malifaux and all kinds of other stuff all the time.